Hey guys, in today's video I'm going to show you how to change out your radiator valves on a sealed combi boiler system without all the hassle of having to drain down the entire system. It can be time consuming, you can end up with airlocks and other problems. So I'll show you how to do that job nice and easy. So on the left side here I've got what's called a TRV, and that's the flow side, and on the right side I've got a lock shield. Now you can tell what's the flow side by turning on your central heating and just feeling the pipe, and whichever one warms up first will be your flow side. If they are switched the other way around, it's not a big deal, as most TRVs today are what's called bi-directional, so you should be fine. So the first step to this job is turning off the central heating. So let's go and turn off the boiler now and any programmers that call for heat. So we're just going to turn off our programmer here. And then if we take a look at our consumer unit, we're looking for the switch that says boiler. So you can see right there, boiler. Let's turn that off. So now that step one is complete and the boiler is turned off, what we need to do now is go around all the radiators in the house, closing off the valves. So let's go ahead and do that now. So on the TRV side, we just set that back to 0, like so. And then on the lock shield side, you're going to pop the cap off like that. And then we want to turn this valve clockwise to close it off. What you want to do first though is grab yourself a Sharpie and just make a mark on the valve itself, because we need to count how many turns this takes to turn it off. So I'll just use a set of pliers here to count how many turns this takes. So that was about 1 revolution, which totally makes sense as this valve is closest to the boiler, so it'll be closed off the most. So I just want to quickly explain why we're counting the turns on the lock shield so you understand it. So what we're trying to do is keep the system balanced. So generally the radiator that's closest to the boiler will have the valve closed off the most, and the radiator that's furthest away from the boiler will have the valve closed off the least. So that will keep the system balanced, which means when you go to turn the boiler on, all the radiators should heat up at a similar time, and you shouldn't have one radiator that's way hotter than another radiator. So that's all we're trying to do here, keep the system balanced, and that's why we count the turns. So I've got myself a little notebook and a pen here, and all I've done is wrote down all the different rooms, and I'm going to annotate next to each room the number of turns it's taken to close off a lock shield. And then once the job is complete, I can go round into each room and open that lock shield back up to the correct amount of turns. So just to demonstrate the system balancing here, this radiator is further away from the boiler than the last radiator, so it should take more turns to close off. So there's 1 turn, there's 2 turns, and there we go. That's that one closed off now. So just go around every room in your house now, ensuring that the TRV and the lock shield are both closed off with either some pliers or a spanner, and then we can proceed to the next step. Okay, so just a quick recap now. The boiler is turned off. Every single valve in the property is closed, except for the one that you're going to be working on. So what I want you to do is turn that one up to the maximum. So in a moment, we're going to bleed this drain valve. What I want you to do is see where this hole is. Just move it so it points towards you. And then I've got a bucket here ready to catch the water. And then I've got my radiator key where we're going to pop in here, and we're going to turn this anti-clockwise to loosen it off, and water should start coming out. But before we do that, let's go check the boiler and take a look at the pressure in there first. So let's just take a quick mental note of the pressure. So as you can see, it's on 1 bar at the moment. Okay, so let's proceed now to drain down this radiator. And we're going to keep draining this down until it ends up being a trickle. What this is doing is reducing pressure in the entire system, as we have the TRV open at the bottom there. So once it's done letting water out, you can close the bleed valve back off. So just turn that clockwise and lock it off like so. Now let's quickly check our boiler gauge again and see how much the pressure has dropped off. So as you can see there now, it's on about 1/4 bar of pressure. So you can see the pressure's massively dropped off in the system. Now that we've reduced the pressure in the system, we can now close off our TRV to 0. Okay, so now that both these valves are closed off, the water in this radiator is isolated, so we can proceed to the next step. So there's a nut on the side of this TRV, so I'm going to loosen that off anti-clockwise with this spanner. Then I'm going to get a stop end that I've bought from Screwfix that looks like this, a 15mm stop end, and I'm going to screw this into the radiator to isolate any water pouring out of it. Now sometimes you don't have much play on these pipes, so if you don't worry about it. Just get something like I've got a plumb top here that goes around the pipe there, and that'll allow the water to drain into this tub, and then I'm going to decant it into the larger tub if I haven't got any play on these pipes. So just let your entire radiator drain down if you can't screw in one of these stop ends into the radiator to isolate the water. Now these double convector radiators hold a lot of water, so just make sure you've got your larger bucket to hand in case you need to drain down the entire radiator. So we're just going to loosen this nut off now, so just remember righty tighty, lefty loosey, or you can have the valve body set up so you can visually see which way it tightens and loosens off. So grab your pliers to support the body of the valve and your spanner to loosen the nut off, and then I'm just going to pull up on that nut like so, and you can see it's already dripping out. So let's get our plug and screw it into the radiator. So there we go, the 15mm nut has isolated this radiator. Now I got lucky, there's some play in this pipe. If there isn't any play in the pipe, don't worry, just proceed to drain out the entire radiator. Now if you do need to drain the entire radiator down, just get your radiator key and loosen off the bleed valve, and that will just increase the flow of water coming out of the radiator at the bottom there. So now we want to loosen this nut off so we can move this valve so it's facing us. So just grab your adjustable pliers and your spanner and just adjust this about a quarter of a turn to loosen it off like so. Remember there's still water pressure on that pipe, so you only need to crack it off slightly, and then I should be able to turn the valve like so. Now remember when we checked the boiler earlier on, there was still some pressure in the system, so there's still pressure in the water pipe here. So when we go to open this valve up, water will come out. Now this is an upstairs radiator, so there won't be as much water coming out as if it were a downstairs radiator. Now if you recall, all the radiators downstairs were closed off at the valves, so the only water in the system is the water in the pipework. So like I say, if this was a downstairs radiator, there would be more water in the pipework draining out. This is an upstairs radiator, so we should see less water coming out of the valve. So I've got my buckets at the ready, and I'm going to slowly open this valve up. And as you can see, barely any water has come out. So we'll just let that drain for a moment. Now I can proceed in taking this valve off. Like so. Now get your new valve, have it in the closed position and pop it on your pipe. And I'm just going to nip this up hand tight for the minute. Like so. Now let's loosen off the 15mm stop end out of the radiator nut. Let's just nip this up hand tight. Now we can tighten up both nuts with our adjustable pliers and spanner. And let's do the same with this nut. So now that the nuts have been tightened down and the valve installation is complete, you can open up the TRV on all the radiators and do the same on the lock shields. If you recall earlier on, we had a notepad that we jotted down the number of turns required. So let's go do that now. Okay, so once you've opened up all your valves on all your radiators, the next thing to do is add inhibitor. So there are two ways to add inhibitor to the system. The first way is to loosen off this plug, so you can use a socket or an adjustable wrench. So just loosen off the plug, I've already pre-loosened it, and then I've got a 15 to 22mm elbow. So all you need to do is screw the 15mm end into the radiator like so. And I'll pop a link in the description to some of these items such as the elbow and the plumb tub, and a few other handy tools you can use to make this job easier. So just get your funnel, pop it into the elbow like so, and then you can dispense 500 millilitres of inhibitor into the radiator. Just ensure that you've drained down the radiator by 500 millilitres so there's enough room to add the inhibitor. The other way to do this is to add the inhibitor to the tail rail. So there's a plug at the top here, so it's super easy just to loosen that off, take the plug out, and then you can pop your funnel in and dispense the 500 ml of inhibitor into the tail rail, and that'll introduce it to the system. All you need to do again is make sure you loosen this knot off and you allow 500 ml to drain out into your plumb tub first, so there's enough room to add the inhibitor. Okay, so now that we've added the inhibitor to the system, what we need to do is open up the filling loop at the boiler and repressurize the system. So let's do that now. So on your boiler, you'll find what is called a filling loop. So all you need to do is open the valves up nice and slowly, and same with this one. And you'll hear that will start introducing water back into the system. And if you take a look at the gauge up here, you can see the dial is increasing. Once it gets to 1, turn it off, like so. Now all we need to do is turn the boiler back on at the consumer unit. So I've already done that, so it's just in that cupboard there, and I've switched the boiler back on, and then do the same with any programmers. So again, I've already done that, just switch it back on, so everything's up and running. So now that we've repressurized the system at the filling loop, all you've got to do now is get your radiator key and just bleed the valve again and just release any trapped air in the system, and then you can go check the boiler again, check the gauge and make sure it's still at 1. If there is trapped air in the system, it might have dropped a little bit, so all you've got to do then is just use the filling loop, open the valve and just let a bit more water in until the gauge is at 1 again. The reason why I've set the gauge to 1 is because the system is cool and it's off at the moment. Once I turn the central heating on, the water will get hot, water will expand, and that'll increase the pressure in the system, probably to about 1.5. So in a range of 1 to 1.5 is what we're looking for. So now all you need to do is turn your central heating back on, and that's the job complete. There is one more way of doing this without having to drain down the entire system, and I'll just show you that now. It's a Arctic Haze freeze kit. Now these are about 30 quid, so I mean, if you're anything like me, I'd rather save my money and do it without it, but that is another option. So if you're a little bit tentative about doing it this way, you can use a freeze kit, and these are quite effective methods of freezing the pipe. So it'll plug some ice in the pipe and that'll isolate it for you so you can work on your valve. So I thought I'd give that one a mention as well. Right then, that's it from me. Hopefully the video has been helpful to someone out there. If it has been helpful to you, please consider subscribing and liking, as it massively helps the channel out. And I'll catch you guys in the next video. See you later.